Literally crashed my whole system. I don't know what caused it, but my general belief is it was the kidney again. And my sound effect doesn't even work. It's just sad. I don't even know. Oh, maybe it does. Let's see. Son of a bitch. What is going on?
The kidney has a
Welcome back. So, hi.
special
There you are.
place
Hello.
in the
Hello,
heart.
chat room. Yes. Your YouTube went to Texas, Paul. Well, you're in good hands, though. At least that's there. Okay, hold on. We got to close this. Leave. Yes, I'm going to reopen the whole thing. There we are. Excellent. Let me see if I can get my to where I can actually hear the audio on things again. I missed you guys too. Sorry about that. Let me make sure I'm back up on Instagram. Sometimes that just craps out. Let's see if it takes a moment for it to update. Nope, there it is. Okay, good. That's what I tried to fix, the thing where the YouTube people aren't showing up in this particular chat, and I shouldn't have done it. I should just left well enough alone, fixed it when I was off air, but I didn't have time, and then but I'm back, and that's the important thing. And you missed me, so hit the like again, because we gotta. I don't know. In some cases, it's a new stream. If you've already hit it and it's still checked, you're good. But refresh all that stuff, share, and let people know I'm back up now. Where was I? Oh, yes. Making an excellent point about RFK Jr. Now, the big thing was, will he steal from the Biden campaign or the Trump campaign? And I have been saying from day one, the Trump campaign. There is this illusion. This was what was freezing when I came back, was that there's this invisible voter out there that is the savior of all lost campaigns. If we could get these people, this disenfranchised group who doesn't normally vote, and we could bring those people in, there's got to be 1 million of them out there, and that would put us over the top in a bunch of these areas, right? And so let's court those folks. The problem is, one of the reasons why those are disenfranchised out there voters is because if you court them, you lose all the normal people who've already gone through the intellectual exercise of thinking about what those people have thought about, but they've gone, oh, that's fucking nuts. And then they vote based on their opinion of how stupid that is, because they've actually gone, I wonder what it would be like in a world where nobody gets vaccinated. You know what I mean? Like, they've done that, and they're like, my children would die. That would suck. Measles, fucking bubonic plague. What the fuck are these guys talking about? And then they get on with their lives, and then they vote normally. And if you start courting the people who are like, we need a world without vaccines, those people will go, wait a minute, you're with the people. Okay, I got fucking kids. I don't want to die. So you loner psycho mountaintop losers who think you can avoid it all the time, go fuck yourself. And you lose as many voters as you would gain. That's if it's a 1-to-1, and it ain't. The other thing is that this group that you're courting, this strange, bizarre, external, like this amorphous, I don't know, like whisper voter. One of the things about that, and this goes for the youth vote a lot of times, because I don't know if you know this, but people age, and the youth vote is not always the same. The youth vote changes all the time. And when people talk very much about the youth vote or play, but we got to get the youth involved. We got to get the youth involved. These youths involved. What they're saying is we're having a hard time selling our ideas to adults, because even if our ideas are good, we're terrible at conveying that they're good, or we've lost the PR battle in it, or our ideas actually do suck, and and grown people are slowly getting wind of it. So how about we get the ones that we can convince to go to Vietnam, right? That we can suck up the people who can be easily duped by people like Charles Manson. That zone of human during this particular window where they're technically adults, but their brain has not fully formed yet. Let's aim for those people. Okay, getting youth involved in voting and wanting them to vote for you, not a problem. But relying them on as a vote to get you over the top is bad news, especially when you have plenty of adults that you could get to vote for you that are consistent voters. That's a talk for another time. But the RFK question has been one of the big ones, and I would like to share this with you as well. Trump campaign dismayed as RFK Jr. starts aggressively courting MAGA voters. Now, they didn't have a problem when he was, I guess, passively doing it, right? But in this particular case, he's now doing it on purpose. He's going for them directly. And that's because that's his only hope for a plurality of voters in any situation. If there are 10 voters up for grabs, and there's 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, and he comes in and wants to carve off, 3 of them, he's going to carve off 1 Democrat, 2 Republicans. That's how it's going to work. It's the only way he gets anywhere. There is no way he carves off 1 Republican and 2 Democrats. It's not happening. He knows this. Dennis fucking Kucinich of the dude paid by, was it Turkey and Syria to big up that country? Nuts. Anyways, they know that. His staff knows it. His pollsters know it. Everybody looks at it. And the Trump campaign fucking knows it too. So they're going after Trump voters. And what they think, I would guess the semi-long-term strategy, if he views himself as a young man who's got prospects, is that he's definitely going to lose this time. But, he's not as old as these guys, and he's got another decade to maybe goose something. And if you're going to build something, it's going to be out of the cadaver of what was left of the Republican Party, not the Democrats. Democrats are busy passing infrastructure bills. Democrats are busy stabilizing the economy after the second giant crash caused by Republican fuckery. So the 2008, if you'll recall, George Bush was president and Obama comes in and everybody's like, more people were put on food stamps during Obama's first term than ever in history. Yes, because the crash happened before he took his oath of office. And his job was to make sure we don't enter a depression, which he did. And all these people are like on food stamps at the time are no longer on food stamps largely. And the largest number of people who went off food stamps in his second term that had ever gone off of food stamps, but nobody brings that up because whatever. Anyways, point being, Democrats are busy governing, and these motherfuckers are chewing each other to pieces. And mainly because it's a goddamn clown show. This is a lovely piece. Just this little moment. She was on Steve Bannon's War Room, complaining that people thought they were making fun of her because of her religious beliefs. That's her excuse on it, by the way. Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene took to the airwaves Tuesday. Airwaves? The intertubes, I think. Took to the intertubes. She by no means was on the airwaves. Seriously. To complain she'd been unjustly mocked for claiming God punished the East Coast with an earthquake and sent a warning with a solar eclipse. Now, she goes, this is her direct quote. They most recently mocked my faith and made fun of me saying that God is sending us a sign to repent. She said on RAV, I really don't care what they make fun of me about. Well, you kind of do, or you wouldn't be bitching about it. Also, no one is mocking your faith. There is nothing in regard to faith that has anything to do with the idea that God creates earthquakes to scare people into choosing his side. That's what we call superstition. That's the same mentality of them going, hey, maybe if we chuck a virgin in the volcano, it won't erupt. There is no difference between those two beliefs. Those are both superstitions. They are not faith. Faith is God will see us through an earthquake. The earth has these things about it. Life is full of bumps and ruffles and horrors and joys, and God will see us through this. That's what faith is. But the reason she says they want to mock my faith is because, A, she doesn't know the difference because she's gross and idiotic, but also because she wants to use the word faith as a shield for her bullshit. It's superstition. Very superstitious. Writings on the wall. Yeah. Green was responding to criticism she received after claiming a magnitude 4.8 earthquake, which, by the way, if you live in California, is like a snooze button earthquake. I've been through dozens of 4-point-somethings over the years, and you're like, what the fuck? Fine. That rattled East Coast cities from Philadelphia to Boston, and Monday's eclipse were signals of God sending America strong signs to tell us to repent. So this is the okay, real quick, beyond the idea, the ridiculous idea that God has to send you ginormous signs to repent, like the end is nigh, get your shit together, like you're reading, like God has to ring some sort of like fucking like faith dinner bell. You know what I mean? Like, okay, one last chance to get over the fucking hump, right? Besides the idiotic notion that God has to do that, imagine how small you have to think God is, that he's kind of like a middle manager in the sky that only has a couple of options in his repertoire, and one of them is big, scary sky stuff, right? Imagine being that fucking weak in your faith. Let's put that aside for a second. The other thing is that apparently this asshole thinks the eclipse wasn't predictable. That the eclipse, well, it's aside from, oh, where'd the sun go? Like, motherfucker, we literally know when the next one's gonna be. You could say signpost, but to what? Because they've been happening always. They're only a sign if you don't understand a heliocentric model of the fucking galaxy. If you're like, what the fuck? At that point, all right, this is on the same level that rain is a sign. Right? That clouds are a sign. Oh, I don't know. The sky looks bad. We shouldn't go shopping. Like, it's the same level of faith or awareness. It's fucking goofy. Let me give you, well, actually, that's unfair because rain at least is less predictable. You could have it, you couldn't have it. It might happen. There's percentages of possibility. The eclipse is absolutely materially trackable. It's specific, right? It happens like clockwork. As a matter of fact, the movement of the earth around the sun is what our fucking clocks are based on. All right, so rotation of the earth, seasons. Yeah, okay. That happens. That's consistent. It's consistent. What's also consistent is our fucking stupidity. You could say, if you walk outside, I will forgive you. If you walk outside because you're going to go on a long car trip and lightning strikes your car and you go, you know what, I got to say, I don't normally believe in signs, but something, I'm going to stay home. You know what? I don't think that's necessarily the message. I don't think you can necessarily say that there is even a message conveyed, but I would understand if you were about to, like, waving bye to everybody, you got your backpack, you're about to put it in the trunk and whatever, and you go, I left something in the house. And you walk back to the house, and a giant lightning bolt strikes your car, and it burns to a crisp, and you're like, and you don't immediately go, I'm going to rent a car and just, fuck it. Somebody get hurt on the phone, I call my insurance, If you immediately go, yeah, maybe, I would kind of forgive you. Even a rational person in that moment would go, this might test the limits of maybe my knowledge of how the universe works. So maybe not. I would be okay with you forgetting that. All right, that's fine. But again, an eclipse, we know years out this is going to happen. And therefore, not a sign, not ever a sign, won't be a sign, can't be a sign. And by the way, famously, that's where the joke in Spies Like Us came from.
All right.
Which is...
Stop right there. and I'll bring back the sun.
Why is everything so, it's very strange. Everything's so loud, and I don't hear it, but you guys hear it. But like, that's where that stop right there and I'll bring back the sun idea came from. I'm going to open, and like, I'm afraid to click anything right now. It's a sign. Switch over. There you go. I see. This is set on the wrong headphones. There we go. So now I should be able to hear it. Yeah.
All right. Stop right there, and I'll bring back the sun.
Right. That was based on a moment allegedly, I forget what explorer it was, who was captured by natives, and there was an eclipse, and he knew there was going to be an eclipse, so he waited for the eclipse and said, and right as it was about to say, he's like, "I'm going to take away the sun if you guys don't let us go," and then the sun disappeared for a minute. You're like, "You let us go, and I'll bring it back. I promise." All right, I will bring back the sun, but I'm trusting you, And then, like, I think he used the clapper was the idea, and the locals were like, "Oh my fucking God, let him go, Jesus! He knows God personally, right?" That's the same brain capacity we see on display here. Yeah, Montgomery Cliff was it originally? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. It's a dick for.
What's a dick for?
To pee with.
So, it's crucial that we understand the difference between faith and superstition. And I'm going to tell you, come here, chat room. And I'm sorry, YouTube folks, you're not involved in this. I can see you. You're seen. It's just not popping up on there. I know you're there. Specifically, I want to tell you, you'll get a lot farther in your conversations with people that have religious beliefs. And also, by the way, you can't believe in something like Islamophobia and shit on people like religion in the abstract, because you have it too. You just have it in a more generalized sense. You just don't voice your belief that Islam is bullshit, right? You're happy saying American Christianity is shit, but it's a little more awkward when you're standing in front of a Hasidic Jew or a Muslim Oman or a group of Muslims and going, everything you believe is fucking trash, right? Like, it gets awkward. So I don't want to hear anybody talk about Islamophobia from anybody if you generalize that kind of thought. But I will say that if you're trying to have a conversation with around this kind of shit, and you're talking to people who aren't necessarily aligned with the marges of the world and all that kind of stuff, and you are trying to address this, and you know that they have spiritual or religious beliefs, the distinction between faith and superstition will get you a long way. Okay? And if you're able to make that distinction, like I explained it just now, you'll find way more agreement amongst the quote faithful about that. It's a difference between faith and like belief in astrology or something, okay? I'm just telling you. And again, this goes to like the climate argument. Yes. Is the climate changing? Yes. Is there an anthropological effect on climate? Yes. However, most of these idiots, Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't have the mental capacity to understand the multitude of ways that the environment around the world the entire globe is affected by both solar winds and the magnetic field of the earth and human beings emitting more greenhouse gases. She just can't fathom it. She's not capable. You're literally explaining calculus to a third grader with a bandage on their head in a coma. Stop. But what they might get, what they can get, and what they can understand, they can kind of grasp. They can grasp pollution. So when you're talking to someone like that, just talk to them in terms of pollution. You don't have to win them all the way over, because quite frankly, you can get to electric cars and a bunch of other stuff like away from fossil fuels just by trying to eliminate pollution. Because even the Keystone XL pipeline, one of the concerns about it was that it would leak, and not just spill oil on the ground, killing fucking, I don't know, prairie mice or some shit, but that it would leak into the aquifers, and everybody who wants drinking water from that area, which is, by the way, largely red voting territory, those fuckers, specifically, those fuckers drink from that well. You can make them understand based on pollution. They're not going to get it because of climate change. They're not going to grasp it. In the same way that the faithful are not going to take your shit talk about anybody with religious beliefs kindly, and it will give them an example of, hey, at least, and I'm not talking about the pseudo evangelicals. I'm talking about a genuine person of faith. They're going to look at you talking like that and go, well, you may not believe what I believe, but at least I'm nicer than you are. At least it keeps me from being mean, because I genuinely believe it, not the fakers. Because you don't seem happy at all. And you don't seem like you have a purpose, and you seem kind of angry in the abstract at everyone. You're not going to convince them. But if you can make the distinction, again, between faith and superstition in these conversations, you make the distinction between climate change and pollution in these situations, you will reach the people that are hitherto unreachable. Yep. How has faith in getting through to maggots in a meaningful way? I don't. No, I'm not. No, Raven King, you misunderstand me. It's a very important point. Wait, here it is. Raven King says, Hal has faith in getting through to maggots in a meaningful way. I don't. I'm not talking about getting through to maggots. I am not. I'm talking about people who aren't maggots, but might be on the other side of the aisle from you, or might lean that way, or don't believe in whatever, universal health care, these kind of things, the things you actually want to have happen. They're not maggots. They aren't. They're the distinction. They're not in the basket of deplorables. They're distinctly different, right, from that folk. I'm talking about when you talk to other people. They're not all the same. They're not. And if you say they are, then again, that's an us against them mentality that's not going to, I mean, you're never going to win them over. What, are they rotten from birth? I mean, at this point, then explain to me how the Palestinian-Israeli conflict gets ever worked out. Right? Because obviously both of those groups think that about the other group. And again, you also don't have to converse with it. Somebody's like, you don't have time for this kind of thing, or it's exhausted or whatever. I don't care. Okay. Then don't. That's the other thing. Drop it and move away from the entire conversation. You don't owe anyone a full conversation on it. You don't have to argue. You don't even have to voice your opinion to any of these folks. But if you're going to do it in a way that will make people understand that you can grasp the complexity of the issue, and you're not afraid of that, which I don't think anybody here is in particular, it also becomes, and I genuinely mean this, it also becomes less exhausting when you think of it that way. Thank you. By the way, you're watching Hal Sparks Mornings Mega Worldwide. Phil will be joining us in just a little bit from Ukraine. I've got it's all set up. We're good. And we have obviously a lot to talk about, because it looks like the vote for funding is going to come to the floor this week or early next week, maybe even by Friday. So fingers crossed it will. But once brought to the floor, it will pass. And the Freedom Caucus wants Mike Johnson's head. And by the way, there's going to be a lot of video, for example. There's going to be a lot of video specifically of Mike Johnson saying kind of exaggerated Biden crime family stuff at press conferences. Look for it, or statements about the Comer shit and all that. You just get used to the idea that he's going to release it. Why is he saying those things now and all that kind of stuff? Because those statements are going nowhere. That committee, the impeachment, is going nowhere. It's like he's just fucking yelling into a jar. It will have zero effect on reality. This vote will. Okay? Yeah, I agree. You know what I mean? When somebody just goes, like, and then close the lid. There you go. There, I have a jar full of screams over there in case I need one later. That's the effect of Mike Johnson saying Biden crime family, or we need to get more information, or they need to give us recordings of blah, blah, blah. Like, no. It doesn't do shit. Zero. Nothing. It will not affect the material world in any way. What Mike Johnson says about Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or any of that stuff is not going anywhere. But by saying this shit, he heads off the criticism and the attack from his high right flank in the Republican Party, at least temporarily, makes it harder for them to vacate him if he's blathering on about throwing Joe Biden in jail or lock him up or some shit. He knows that. By the way, he also might mean it, but it doesn't matter. I don't give a fuck. Again, this is if Mike Johnson thinks Joe Biden is going to be impeached based on what the Comer investigation is showing, that's like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying God is warning us with a fucking eclipse. It's this. I mean, I respond to it the same way. I don't give a like. It's not, so who gives a shit? It's going nowhere. It just isn't. It's just not. But the vote this Friday will. So he can fucking yammer all he wants about this shit and make it difficult for Marge and all these others to actually bring the vote to the floor, which is strategically what he would do, what anybody would do in that situation. But what he can't do is not bring the vote to the floor because he's going to do it. Because if he doesn't, he will have no future. He'll basically set the Republican Party up for an even bigger loss in the fall. They know that the majority of Republicans support Ukraine funding. And he's not going to be hostage to fucking 1/3 of Marge's fucking district. Just stupid. He can put it off for a little while, but what came back, this is why the vote's going to come up. What came back when they went home for the Easter holiday is they heard a lot of messages, including my silly phone calls that I've been making increasingly over the last couple of weeks to his office about passing the fucking funding. And when they hear from people that they shouldn't, it's the same 9 people. Anyways, hit that like if you would, just because Phil's going to be along in just a moment. I hope. Should be all right. In his brand new studio, if all's well. And wait, no, okay. I thought something happened. There's a tickle in there. So, kind of crucial. Does that make sense? How you talk about something has as much an impact on the person you're conversing, on yourself, as it does the person you're conversing to. Holding yourself to a logical and reasoned standard when you're discussing things is difficult. It really is. It takes more work, and you might feel like you're trying to get blood from a stone, right? But it's worth it in the long term. Because again, most of the time when you're talking to even maggots online, you're not really talking to them. You're talking just over their shoulder to the person behind them that has followed them into the room but isn't 100% committed to what they believe. They're not there yet. But it's real easy to get against you when you just seem like you're screaming, and they were brought into the room going, this person's just going to scream a bunch and say a bunch of shit. They don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. And then if you go, actually, I do know what I'm talking about, and you know what I'm talking about. That's the thing. We both know pollution is bad, all right? We both know the difference between belief in a higher power that's gotten people through really difficult things and throwing a fucking woman in a volcano to stop it from erupting, right? We both get that. Okay. You have a congressperson who you're telling me knows what's up, who believes that the eclipse, which happens like clockwork, is a sign from God and not a signpost, I guess. That's really weird. You got to admit, that's silly. Doesn't mean faith is silly. She's silly. Superstition is silly. Okay, we agree? Okay, good. I know you don't believe in climate change or whatever. We both agree you don't own a house that's downwind from a fucking coal plant, I guess. Nor would you buy one, no matter how cheap it was, right? So we both agree on pollution. Good? Good. Well, let's mitigate that. You don't have to go as far as I'm going to go. You meet me there. You meet me at pollution. You say you're pro-life. Pollution, car exhaust sends 100,000 kids to the fucking emergency room every year. I don't think either one of us are for more kids going to the emergency room because they're having asthma attacks or respiratory problems or infections, right? We're both good on that. If you can talk in those terms, again, you might not convince the person right across from you because they're bullheaded and full of shit and they want what they want. They'll try to move the goalpost and all that. But the person over their shoulder, again, who isn't quite committed, will notice. Does that make sense? Okay. Gas stoves and asthma. That's a great example. Nobody is stopping anybody from, as a matter of fact, the gas stove thing should have been, and this would be my message to Democrats when talking about this. Here's what the message on gas stoves is. Republicans everywhere across the country block us on the regulations necessary to make sure there's enough ventilation that we could make sure that houses that have gas stoves have enough ventilation so that the gas is trapped while it's being used, don't cause childhood asthma that grows up and costs the country a lot of money with respiratory illnesses well into later life. We could save money, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, just by quelling that one part. Just through that regulation. You don't have to get rid of them. You just have to make sure there's enough ventilation. But local Republicans they keep blocking regulations for regulation's sake. Phil's waiting in the background. I'm going to bring him in just 1 second. So we have to pass limits on where they can be put in the future. If you're not going to let us regulate that old houses have, and we'll even give you a fucking grant to add a new vent. That's not the problem. Because it'll be worth more to us. It costs tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future to deal with the physical ramifications of this shit. But in the future, if you're going to put it in these kind of houses, these kind of apartments, back to back, close, not enough ventilation, the design of the building is going to be such that the air can't get out, then you got to have an electric stove in that area because there's not ventilation. That's it. This kind of that's how Democrats need to talk about it. Like, look, we would love to just give everybody a grant to put a new vent in, but these guys don't want the rule that would make the vent possible, which would justify the funding to go through. So we got to just not let them be built in those places because you guys will choke children for the rest of your lives if you have a choice. Now, on that note, hold on 1 second. I will bring in our dear friend Phil. Hold on 1 second to talk about it because we were just talking about, and you can hear him in the background a little bit. There we go. Paste him in there and go okay. And it's okay. Hopefully he comes in. Let's see if it works. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Ittner joining us. How are you?
So I get to follow choking children.
Yes. Well,
okay. That's an intro.
Thank you. I by the way, Philip Ittner has a new podcast coming out called On the Edge. We're all waiting patiently for the first episode, but also just follow him on YouTube, and it's Ittner Philip on Shitter. And you're on Threads? Is it the same there, or is it Philip Ittner?
Yeah. No, I think I'm Philip Ittner on Threads.
Great.
I should use Threads more because Twitter is just a shit show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great place to take the temperature on trolling, but that's all it's good for. Genuinely. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you want to go, sometimes I go to like BitChute and other these like psycho QAnon sites and see what's bubbling up in terms of the talking point I know I'm going to have to deal with. Yeah, I know where it's going to come from. Sure. And let's see. Volume wise, I want to make sure he's loud enough. I think you're okay. Okay. Yeah, I think so.
I could try and boost.
Nope. I think we're okay. I'll boost you on this end. We're good. So, anyways, hi, how are you? First of all.
I'm okay. I'm pissed off, but that's par for the course.
Sure.
Recently, with the way that we've been letting these people down, and we promised them that we would, if they gave up their nukes, that we would
protect them. Yeah.
that we would guarantee their sovereignty, and we
Right.
are absolutely crapping the bed
Mhm.
on that one.
Yep.
And it's
Well, yeah.
getting worse, and it's I mean, I you know, I expect it from guys like Johnson and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the rest of it.
Right.
But what's really making an impact here in Ukraine is to have Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin go out and say, "Oh, don't attack Russian oil production, because that could affect the cost of oil on a global stage." And the Ukrainians are like, "Go fuck yourself."
Typical.
You know, so firstly, you're not going to give us the weapons that we need to defend ourselves, and then you're going to dictate how we use our own weapons.
Yeah,
that statement by Johnson was by Austin.
Lloyd Austin. Yeah,
it was, and I think Lloyd Austin has been SecDef has been very good as SecDef, but that was bad. That was really, really bad.
Well,
for him to say to the Ukrainians, "Don't attack oil production in Russia because it'll affect the global price of oil," and the Ukrainians are like, "Motherfucker, we are getting attacked on the daily."
Yeah.
And one of the best ways for us to retaliate is to cripple their economy.
Right.
You know, and
if we can't have money, neither can they, I think is the argument.
And also I've seen so many Ukrainians responding to this, and they've been incredibly patient with us.
Yes.
They have been incredibly we understand that you were attacked too, that there's Kremlin stooges in your Congress. We accept that fact. We accept this, we're coming to you hat in hand, so beggars can't be choosers. They have been repeatedly far more gracious than I think we would be if the situation was reversed. But I have seen them in the last 48 hours or whatever, and our European allies as well, pointing out the fact that we targeted Nazi Germany's oil production in the Second World War. That was a legitimate strategic target for us to defeat Nazi Germany. And the Ukrainians look at Moscow no differently than we looked upon Nazi Germany when we got involved in the Second World War. So for us to tell them, "Oh, we're not going to provide you with defensive weapons," even though we promised we're going to do that. But not only are we not going to provide you with the weapons to defend your cities and save your civilians' lives when apartment buildings are being bombed by these glide bombs that are blowing out entire apartment block buildings, but could easily be knocked out by Patriots or other air defense systems. We're not going to provide you with those. Oh, but God forbid that you should attack oil production in Russia, because that will affect the global economy when it comes to oil prices and the price of oil. And Ukrainians, I think, are at a point where I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're very, very close to a point where Ukraine says, and Europeans, by the way, who are standing with Ukrainians on this issue, we can't trust the Americans anymore. We can't trust them.
I get where that's coming from, and again, most of that has to do with Johnson running interference for these things, and that vote is most likely coming to the floor on Friday or Monday. That looks like it's going to happen. The interesting thing is, and I think really they know it's going to go through and they know it's going to pass. They've been trying to give Putin a toehold. These particular people, I personally believe, in the Freedom Caucus and others, have just been trying to give Putin a toehold where he could argue for slicing off the Donbass and all this kind of shit. If we could just put Ukraine on their heels long enough, Putin said, if they stop for a week, they'll lose. We'll win. Well, it stopped for more than 2, and they haven't. Meanwhile, also, the Biden administration just redirected, and this is from a seizure of weapons that they got. The United States directed thousands of weapons to Ukraine earlier this month that it seized from an Iranian group attempting to smuggle them to Yemen's Houthis. More than 5,000 AK-47 rifles, machine gun sniper rifles, rocket launchers, 500,000 rounds of 7.62 ammunition were transferred to the Ukrainian forces on April 4th, according to CENTCOM. These were Russian weapons given to Iran to give to the Houthis and Hamas, and they were rounded up. Those soldiers that we lost off of the coast of Somalia. That was part of this operation. That they stopped ships that were transferring munitions to Iran and these other groups, or that Iran was sending to these other groups, and are sending them to Ukraine because everybody there is tactically capable of using Russian weapons, and they just send them right back there, which is a good point. The other thing is, and this is in terms of what you were saying about the oil production and all that, one of the reasons why, if there might be, anti-aircraft defense from the Russians close to the front line and the like. But particularly if an area is down, if an area, where they know there's a gap, the Ukrainians are like, well, we can't get our shit through the front line over here. But right now in Orsk, there's a giant flood going on, which apparently is affecting the Voronezh M radar system.
Voronezh.
Voronezh. Yeah. I knew I was going to mispronounce that. That is their biggest anti-missile and air defense radar battery in the country. And that's what it's being affected by, or the people who run it not being there because of the flooding, or, because there's staff that's required to run it. It's not automatic. That them not being around or it being down effectively is what allowed these drones that they made and this Cessna filled with explosives to get through in the first place. There was a gap there, and they went for it. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, let's just see how far we can go. They knew specifically, they had intel, mostly probably from us, that the Orsk missile defense system, the Voronezh system, was down. And they're like, well, I'm telling you, but I'm not telling you that you could probably get something through there right now. And they did. They absolutely did. 800 miles in, or 1,100 kilometers in. Yeah. My feeling is that vote's going to come through, and it's going to be signed super fucking quick. And we're going to hear all this shit for Mike Johnson's head for about a week, and then they'll forget all about it and try to move on to the border because they're trying to run. They don't want to run on this. The Republicans do not want to run on allowing Ukrainians, to get killed. Like it's not working. They thought
I mean, it would be something that the Democrats and the Biden administration could absolutely pound the GOP on 100%. And I get that. And look, the calculus on all of this is totally understandable. Everybody gets it.
Yeah.
But to have Austin, it was
that, right.
You can't tell a people that you are betraying. And I'm sorry, it is a betrayal. If not a betrayal, then it is a relinquishment of
responsibility,
the promises and the responsibility that you yourself. We literally said to these people, give up your nukes, we'll keep your borders safe.
Right.
And the Ukrainians said, you know what? Okay, we really don't want nukes. We don't have an aspiration to be a global nuclear power. So, okay, we'll do that. And now, does anybody in this world think that if Kiev still had nukes that Moscow would be doing this? Of course they would.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
And then to
for those that don't know, explain. This is during Clinton.
Well, this was the Budapest Agreement of 1994 primarily. That was the big agreement, and it was an effort to, in the collapse of the Soviet Union, to try and keep the stockpile of nuclear weaponry consolidated. Nuclear proliferation in the fall of the Soviet Union was a major concern, and rightfully so. But
anti-proliferation was in a huge upswing late 80s into the 90s. That was an argument back and forth between Reagan and Gorbachev. And then trying to walk back from that precipice was the generalized idea too.
Not to go too deep into Cold War history, but the way we beat the Soviet Union is we outspent them on weaponry system spending, on defense spending, and that included nukes. But once the Soviet Union had fallen, the idea was, hey, let's let's step back from the precipice. Now we don't have the Cold War anymore. There are too many of these former Soviet republics that have nukes on their territory, and that's dangerous. It's proliferation.
Right.
What if these fall into the wrong hands? Or what if you've got, what literally would happen if a nuclear armed Ukraine went up against a nuclear armed Russia?
Right.
And we had the Budapest summit happened primarily, not exclusively, but primarily because of Ukraine. Because we knew the people who know this region and know the Soviet Union and know the Russian Empire and the history of the Russian Empire, ultimately it was going to come down to this. And everybody kind of knew it. And so in an effort to stave off a conflict between a nuclear armed Ukraine and a nuclear armed Russia, we brokered this agreement. The Russians signed it, the Ukrainians signed it, we signed it as guarantors, the Brits signed it as guarantors. I think the French were also involved in signing that.
Yep.
But the West said, don't come at Ukraine. We'll make sure the Ukrainians give up their nuclear weapons so you don't feel threatened by, and also we don't have a global issue with proliferation of nuclear weapons. But in order for you to feel safe, Ukraine, because everybody knows that the first place Moscow is going to come for, or the big goal,
the big prize,
is going to be the prize, the cornerstone, the building block upon which the concept of yourself as a Russian, as empire, is built off of Ukraine.
Right.
It's
the one with all the resources
empire without Ukraine. It's the one with all the resources. It's one with the historical ties. It's the birthplace of Eastern Russian Orthodox culture, Slavic culture. The conversion of the Slavic people to Christianity happened not 5 miles away from where I am right now.
Right.
And that is something that is very much tied into Russian identity and Russian sense of empire. So, I mean, there's the first leader of Chechnya, when the separatist movement, when the independence movement really started in Chechnya, he said, ultimately it's going to be Ukraine that decides whether or not Russia continues as an empire, as it has been for 3 centuries. This identity of self as empire.
Right.
Without Ukraine, they aren't that, and they will have to look in the mirror. They're going to have to do the hard work and all the other things that were kind of kicked down. The can was kicked down the road by Moscow, by Putin, when Yeltsin completely shit the bed and Russia was in complete, chaos, and Putin came in and said all these other things happened. Right. All these other things happened. But the important thing is we knew those of us, those who are experts in this region and those who really did a deep dive into what the possible ramifications of a collapse of the Soviet Union and by extension the Russian Empire, what that would mean and where it would go. And so let's try and stave that off. Let's make some sort of agreement with Ukraine. They'll give up their nukes. We'll guarantee their safety. Well, we're letting them down badly, really badly. I mean, Kharkiv, my God, man. Yeah. Kharkiv is I got friends down in Kherson right now. They're getting bombed on the daily. Kharkiv is absolutely being pelted. And that could be stopped if we sent Patriot systems, for example. Yeah. I mean, that's the big demand right now is out of
right, because they have to be selective about their use of them and where they put them because they don't have enough.
That's right.
And
they also can't spend it because they don't know when's the next tranche of support from the U.S. in particular. When's that going to come? And so even though presumably they could implement stronger air defense, they're trying to keep literally their powder dry so that they can last as long as it will be needed until the U.S. can get its shit together. And it's to have that in this atmosphere, to have that kind of atmosphere, and then have Secretary of Defense say don't attack their oil production. was just such a slap in the. And I know it wasn't meant to be. I don't know it wasn't meant to be, but I suspect it was not meant to be. But it was a massive slap in the face. We're not going to give you weapons, and then we're going to dictate how you use the weapons that you do have.
That you do have, right? Which, are, by the way, aren't particularly weapons in that regard,
and they're not ours.
Yeah,
we didn't give it. We didn't. We're
right.
not. We did not give the drones that Ukraine is using to attack Russia's oil production centers. That's homegrown Ukrainian technology, man. That is drones that they are producing themselves.
Right.
It's not like we get, it's not, they're not hitting oil production in, wherever, in Yekaterinburg. They're not hitting that with HIMARS. But the multiple launch rocket system that we gave, the HIMARS system, which really was a metric changer. It was, it changed a lot here. But they're not attacking oil production with HIMARS. They're attacking oil production in Russia with their own
makeshift
stuff.
drones. Right.
Exactly. This cutting edge technology that the inventive Ukrainians have really pushed the envelope on and are at the forefront of that technology. For us to then say we're not going to give you we're not going to give you air defense. We're not going to give you the means to actually win this fight, or at least get to a place where you make the Russians pay for what they're doing, and hopefully there's change in Moscow. But we're not going to give you the capability to do those two things. But then we're also going to tell you, don't attack the oil production centers in Russia, which is a major, despite all the sanctions, despite everything else, they are still benefiting from their oil production because there are those who still rely on Russian oil and who skirt around sanctions or get exemptions or whatever reason. But to do those two things at the same time, it's an absolute slap in the face. Now, I do agree with you, Hal. I do think ultimately that those who are compromised by Russia, and we all know who they are, it is, and the Republicans themselves, since we last spoke,
it's getting embarrassingly obvious in a bunch of areas.
Obvious.
It's super weird. Like, it's so on the nose. Marjorie Taylor Greene was literally quoting stuff that you and I've seen on the Solovyev say, word for fucking word. It was like, look, you got dog whistles are very important just in politics, but especially when it might actually point to your guilt and who you're communicating with. It's why they're against FISA. That's why they're freaking the fuck out about FISA right now. Because, I mean, she's quoting like she's getting memos sent to her inbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And or Matt Gaetz, or, I saw Matt Gaetz like attacking McCarthy, today. With that whole thing. And let's not get into that because we'll go down a rabbit hole. But, this kind of like, fuck the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Fuck them. It's so short-sighted, and it's such, again, a betrayal of the promises that we made. It would be one thing if we just kind of had kind feelings towards the Ukrainians, and we're like, this really shouldn't happen in the 21st century, and Russia's the aggressor, and we stand against that kind of, brutal land grab, kind of annexation by military might. Let's put that in the history books, and let's not, go for empire by force of arms that annexation of land like in the 20th century we saw repeatedly. Let's try and move away from that. That's one thing. That's one thing. That's morally, philosophically, what kind of world we geopolitically, all these kind of, thought exercises. They're all great. We promised. We signed papers. We have a document signed in Budapest where we said we know that Russia will come for Ukraine and we will defend Ukraine if Ukraine agrees to give up its nukes. We have ink on paper. And in my mind, when I look at global politics and when I look at geopolitics and strategic interests and all the rest of it, it's all, like this argument that NATO expanded east and all the rest. Well, that's talking. That's lip service.
Yep.
We have ink on paper. We signed an agreement where we said we will defend your sovereign borders, 1991 borders, and we are badly letting these people down. We are betraying the promises that we made and the agreements that we signed. And if we don't hold ourselves up to those agreements, and you want to make the argument that was Clinton and it was a different time and all the, well then, okay, then openly say we are removing our adherence to the Budapest Agreement. Make it public. You really want to be a shitty partner and an ally that nobody can depend upon.
Right. Well, yeah.
Then let's
do it in public.
But
right.
Do it in public. Go out and say, we know we signed the 94 Budapest Agreement, but it's inconvenient for us now, so we're not going to do it anymore. Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we're not saying it. We're pussyfooting around this bullshit, and we're trying to have our cake and eat it too, because we're so afraid of Russia, and because Russia has infiltrated the GOP. The GOP, what these two, I'm gapping on the name of the two congressmen who came out this week, just like 2 days ago, and said,
Andy Biggs.
No, we.
Oh yeah. Or you mean the people who
Biggs
were
was
saying,
one of them.
Biggs said the stuff, but Buck was the one who said they've definitely got, they've infiltrated they're getting
infiltrated the GOP.
Talking points. Yeah. He left. Yeah. He's one of the guys who left. Right.
He's Biggs, right, leaving. Left or leaving. He's got another week, right?
Nope. That's that's Gallagher, I think.
Gallagher's the one who's got another
Buck
week left, right.
Buck already left. And by the way, Gallagher's gone. Yeah, this a week from tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. At which point there's a 1-vote majority in there. For the Republicans.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Just.
And by the way, if they didn't have two of those people in office right now, if we'd elected 2 more Democrats and not fucking George Santos and a couple other people, allowed that to happen by ceding territory or whatever, as Democrats, and kind of go and soft pedal. Turnout was great for Democrats, but if it had just been one little slice bigger, we wouldn't be talking about this. This would have passed right away. It wouldn't have even made a blip in the news cycle. Yeah.
And and it would be one thing if they were just spouting off, but they're not. These are elected officials who have a vote in Congress, and they're obstructing aid to this country. And these people, it's the stories that we're hearing here in Ukraine that could have been avoided.
Yeah.
People,
civilian deaths in Odessa.
How many? Odessa, Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Dnipro. They're all getting pelted, absolutely getting pelted, and they could have been avoided if we had just kept the tap open. But we've closed that tap. We've closed the faucet. And people are dying here. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gates and all the GOP Putin sycophants. It'd be one thing if they were just, out there in the public arena and the public square spouting Putin talking points. We could just say, well, fuck these guys. Gotcha. But the problem is, by obstructing weapons and in particular air defense systems, people are dying, man. People are like, this isn't an abstract concept. This isn't something where you can comfortably sit on the hill and be like, oh, I don't want our money, which is a complete misnomer, by the way. And we've talked about this many times. But all the arguments that they put forward about why America shouldn't be supporting Ukraine, it's all straight out of the Kremlin. It's direct. There's a direct pipeline from the GRU in the aquarium, what they call the aquarium. So the headquarters of the GRU, which, by the way, I can't emphasize this enough. The GRU is the military intelligence organ. It's not the CIA, it's the Pentagon. All right? This is a military attack on the West. This is not spycraft. This is not lobbyists or some sort of innocuous kind
or
of like
stealing technology,
every country,
right?
yeah, or every country kind of puts their thumb on the scale, and everybody wants to influence American elections because they have their national interest. This is an attack. This is not just like is the Israeli lobby, as and I don't want to go down that road either because there's that fraught with landmines.
Yeah.
But okay, the British, let's say British interests, and they have lobbyists on the Hill saying, we have this interest and we'd like to have America aligned with it. So we're going to we're going to try and get these people voted in. That would be bad enough. And I'm not, as an American, I'm not crazy about that either. But I could understand that and kind of shrug that off.
Right.
This is not that. This is not lobbying. This is not putting your thumb on the scale, kind of trying to finesse things. It's a fucking attack, man.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it. They've been doing it for a long time.
Well, that goes to, if I may,
develop systems to do this.
Yeah, let's look back on this. One of the things that is my pet peeve is that somehow people viewed, like Marjorie Taylor Greene views the eclipse as a sign from God and not something you could spot a long fucking way off. That Donald Trump, being part and parcel to stacking the court so that they would scuttle Roe. And people going, oh my God, he did it. Of course he was going to fucking do it. He said there had to be a punishment for women in an interview in 2016 with Chris Matthews. End of fucking story. That should have been the end of the goddamn discussion. The Rovember should have happened that year. I've set that aside temporarily because of some of our dear progressive friends who, ran against Hillary so hard that a bunch of people just went, I'll sit this one out. There's a similar, again, you can watch that. It's the physics of an idea or a strategy. You can watch it fucking launch now. We've been through enough of these cycles. We understand that, the news might act like something, like we're reacting to it, but we fucking aren't. We know that some of these things started a while back. And in particular, we talk about Russia's attack on Ukraine and the idea that the 2014 strike and then the idea that they were going to salami slice or take a bigger attack in the second term of Donald Trump, effectively, which they had to punt a year because he lost. So they had to move it another year and try to figure out a way to do it and then use it to try and get Biden out of office and see if they could just, help Trump and all this. It never would have happened. That whole talking point was all charted out clearly back then. But the fact is, by attacking Chechnya and then Georgia, back, in the early 2000s, late 90s, when they're doing this, okay, you don't attack Ukraine straight away. You're going to need the fighters from those areas. You're going to need the resources from those areas because Ukraine is effectively could become, over this time, over the next 30 years, a very wealthy country because they have resources. They are the breadbasket of Europe. They make, a lot of the grain comes from there, so that Europe's going to be a little bit touchy. If you cut off that grain, Africans are going to fucking die, and Americans have this weird thing where we care about what happens to Africans, and so does the UK. We do fucking songs about it and raise money, and we throw music festivals. Understand, this goes back to the fucking fall of the USSR. So they're charting this shit for how do we pick away that support? And how do we build up an armed force that is brutal enough that when we send it in, they'll rape and murder everybody and not give a rat fuck? Well, we'll incorporate the Chechens because they're willing to do it to us for the right price. They'll do it to those guys. And we'll make them have no choice because we'll basically hold their families hostage in exchange and make the other ones rich. So that Chechnya serves that purpose. Georgia for the resources, the transitioning pipeline. They got enough of Georgia, and then they moved into it so that they have to pay a transit fee.
And it's their soft underbelly. It's their soft underbelly. So it's like
they tried to flank
the Central Asians in the Caucasus.
Right. Yeah. They tried to flank the Kazakhstanis right before this shit. They went in there with their forces we're going to try to protect you. And then it ended up being a leader swap, and they got fucked on the deal because Putin's stupid. And ultimately, the guy that got put in there is ethnically more Chinese than he is Russian because of the Kazakhstan bridge between these areas and the Kazakh people that are in there and the Turks and the back history, blah, blah, blah. And so that guy was like, no, Chinese money isn't green, but we spend it a lot easier. And if they want oil and gas, we'll send it to them. If the Europeans want oil and gas, we'll send it to them. We don't have to listen to you fuckers anymore. And that was terrible for Moscow. So they act like right now they have been acting like Kazakhstan doesn't even fucking exist. They tried one time to shut off the pipeline in the first year of the war from Kazakhstan by like ordering them to do it. That lasted about 10 seconds. Didn't amount to a hill of beans. But the point is that we are watching the culmination of a strategy. This is not, what the fuck, Putin just out of nowhere? No. They've been at this since, he's been grinding on this shit since 91. This motherfucker, whether he knew he was going to be the leader of the country or not, whether he thought he was just ultimately be the leader of the military and then they could just scare whoever the next Gorbachev or whoever, into kowtowing. But they've been forming a fighting force, cutting off resources, and then playing fucking poor us rope-a-dope during the 2011 to 2014, leading up to the attack on the Donbass in the first place with this little green men attack, and oh my god, the Russian speakers are being attacked and all this. Like it's been a strategy not for 3 years or a year before, or even during Donald Trump's presidency.
No.
This shit has been going on since the fall of the USSR.
Look at the history of Ukraine. The history of Ukraine. Every time Moscow gets knocked down a peg, post-Civil War, Bolshevik Revolution, what happens? Ukraine has a war of independence, tries to break away from Moscow's dominion. What happens in the Second World War? The second the Soviet Union is put on its back heel because of Germany's aggression, what do the Ukrainians do? Try and get free.
Yeah.
Every single time Russia is diminished, Ukraine, it's the first thing Ukraine does is try to get the hell away from Moscow. And every time Moscow comes back. And when I was on a huge portion of why I'm in this fucking country and why I have put my entire life, this isn't about me, but I have put my entire life on hold. I was going to fucking retire and do documentaries about the Pacific Coast Highway, for God's sakes. Nice stuff. Stuff where people don't die.
You still will.
Stuff where people aren't made orphans or men aren't walking around streets with the limbs missing. I was putting that behind me. I've seen enough of that. But this is more important. It's too important. And part of the reason why I'm doing it is because when I was on Maidan in 2014, people came to me and said, don't turn away from us. Don't forget about us. Because we know what they're going to do. This is 2014. They said to me on Maidan Square, do not forget about us because we know it's only a matter of time before Moscow comes back. So all these talking points of the GOP that it never would have happened if Trump was in charge, pushing away the point that yes, it wouldn't have happened because Trump would have just let Putin take it and he would have just
would have had to happen. But he would just have handed to him. Right.
Wouldn't have had to happen. But let's put that aside for a second and go with these arguments that you hear from the GOP, from these nutbags, the Gateses and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and all the rest of it, Tommy Tuberville and all these morons saying that, if circumstances were different, this war would never have happened. Bullshit. This war was always going to happen.
Yeah, it was a matter of when, not if.
Right. And it was the exception would have been had we been able to stave it off. That would have been the slim opportunity that we did have.
Right.
But hindsight is 2020. I think there are a lot of Ukrainians and there are a lot of people who study this conflict and study the relationship between Moscow and Kiev and know the history, or were on Maidan or whatever. We knew this was coming. We all knew this was coming.
Right.
The exception would have been if we'd avoided this war. this was almost an absolute inevitability. And I never want to say a war is an inevitability because you can always try and avoid it. But 9 times out of 10, Moscow was going to come back for this territory because, again, they need it for their sense of empire, strategic interest, but also just it's who they are.
Right.
They define themselves so much by being empire, and you can't have Russian empire without Ukraine. It's not. Even if they had Georgia, even if they took back the Baltics, it would be a dim little side note. It's always been about Ukraine, and
Here's
they want
I want to
this
make
place because it's their foothold in Europe and it's their identity as empire.
Right.
And that has to be quashed. And
here's the other thing too, is that
we're letting them down, man.
Yeah, we have not mentioned this enough, and I there's still people who hang on to this idea. America is not an empirical power. We're not. We are anti-empire by our very mandate. If we were an empirical power, they would be speaking English in Japan and Germany right now. Full fucking stop. The Russians want to wipe out the Ukrainian language and only allow Russian to be spoken there, for example. And in a country they do not own, that is not theirs, that has its own language, thank you very much. The U.S. is not doing that. We're not doing it anywhere in the world. Anywhere we have a base, our bases, largely our naval bases, except for the ones in Germany where everybody goes if they've been injured, because it's a giant military hospital, effectively, and it's there because it functions as a base to support NATO and the like, but its main purpose is as a giant goddamn hospital and way station before people go back to the States for long-term care. That's its big point. But the rest of the bases are largely just ports, and we have a battalion there
Transit
and a couple of ships, right? And if a ship asks for help in areas where help is never coming, we go do it. That's it. And I have not heard anybody who yells this America empire bullshit all the time be able to argue back that point. It's very, it's silly. And even
I don't recall having covered both Iraq
and a bunch of Starbucks does not an empire make. Is my point.
That's right.
Otherwise, we would have fallen to the Chinese empire a long time ago because there's a Chinese restaurant everywhere. Think of it. People who say that are just like maggots who say taco trucks on every corner because we're going to be invaded by Mexico. Shut the fuck up. The other thing is, and I want to, in relation to the China thing, China is broke as fuck right now. I don't think even on the standards that I've been trying to explain to people, China's economy is smaller than Japan's. It's not the second in the world. It's maybe it'll in another 2 years it'll be on par with fucking California. By itself, and it's got allegedly 1.2 billion people. I'll give them 600 million max on my margin. We'll split the difference, 800 million people. You don't spread butter that thin. That's a recipe for a society in collapse. Which is why there's this story in, I think, the Kiev Independent today about how China's selling drones on the cheap to the Ukrainians in bulk. You know why? Because they're broke as fuck and they've got warehouses full of drones. That's why. And the Ukrainians are modifying them, attaching explosives, and sending them out. And you're say what you will about the cost of a human life and its worth, but the impact on the battlefield, if you can take that person or 6 of them out with a fucking grenade attached to a $150 drone, your ROI on the battlefield is extraordinary. And if China's helping you do that, it hardly points to a super friendship between them. But the thing in line with what we're talking about that I want to point out real quick is this little bit right here. Whoops, hold on. I got to put you in the picture. Sorry.
What do you got here?
Is this guy right here?
My camera.
Yeah, hold on. I'll show you. I'll do it. Don't worry. It's supposed to pop in, but it doesn't sometimes. Okay. It'll pop in. This is a post from Trump on his fucking Telegram channel, which is effectively where he double posts everything that's on his Truth Social thing, minus a couple of things, like the ads. This is the other day, Donald Trump said Biden's on cocaine and he wants him to take a drug test. What that tells you is that Trump knows what being on cocaine is like, and he's probably trying it lately. The old shit isn't working, and he's looking for some cocaine. And he and he's like, that's and he sniffs a lot. Fucking lot. He sniffs a lot. On top of that, along those lines, it's always a projection. It's always a defense. Kill FISA. It was illegally used against me and many others. They spied on my campaign. Okay. The reason he wants FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, destroyed, not warrantless, the ability to get a warrantless wiretap on an American based on their activity interacting with people who already have gotten a FISA warrant against them. Kill the whole thing. Donald Trump wants the U.S. government, specifically the FBI, because they're the one that relate directly to the U.S. for sending people to jail in the United States.
Protection against foreign
influence. He wants it dead because he can't get the info he needs. He can't get the ability to get help financially has been cut off by the sanctions and all this stuff. They're trying everything they can. That's what the fucking Truth Social stock bullshit is about, which, by the way, is doing fabulously. But the reason he wants FISA kicked out of here, I'll show you. We'll just jump this in real quick. It's down 10% today. Ouch. Today, it's down 10%.
Oof.
He's lost,
One day.
$4 billion in the last of magic money in the last week or so? Yeah. Oh, it's glorious.
Well, and situations like that, it's like a contagion. It's only going to get worse. But I just want to finish one quick point that I was going to make when we were talking about empire and American empire. I agree with you. We do not have an empire. American empire, it's an anathema to us because of our birth and breaking away from empire ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're not comfortable in that skin. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't interfere and we don't muck around globally.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we do. Every nation does. They exert their influence as they can. And we have more money and more power, so we exert it on a larger scale. But it's worth making the point that not a single time in our wars, in every single war that we have involved ourselves in, we never said, hey, Vietnam's going to be the 51st state. Iraq's going to be the 51st state. Afghanistan's going to be the 51st state. That was never on the table. Russia, when it comes to Ukraine, they want to annex and control this land by force of arms. It is genuinely.
Well, they say it. It's not even. It's not even like
openly
we have
They openly
files. There are no Pentagon papers around the fucking.
No.
That get out in Russia. They go like, yeah, no, we should do this. We should. Berlin's one missile shot away.
And secondly, the other thing is when it was obvious that we were losing in those conflicts, be it Vietnam, be it Iraq, be it Afghanistan, take your pick. When it was obvious that we were not winning those conflicts, at what point did we threaten them with nuclear weapons? When did we threaten Baghdad with nukes? When did we threaten
tactical
Kabul
or otherwise?
No, that was never part of the discussion. Mm-hmm. The only reason why we have, well, one of the main reasons why we have these people cowering from Moscow is because they have nukes and they saber rattle and they make everybody afraid. Russia is not going to use nukes. The second they do, they're done. It's over. Unless it is a full-scale exchange, mutually assured destruction, which I do not believe, as crazy as Putin is and as crazy as Moscow is, and this sense of this need
for hedonists. It's not going to happen.
No, they want it. That's right. Exactly.
They want to live.
Talked about this in the past. They want to live because they want to have their
prostitutes and child sex slaves and fucking gold and all the bullshit.
Sure. No, they want all that.
They're
no
afterlife.
They're not going to use nukes. But by the sheer fact that they will saber rattle with their nukes is an inflection point on how they see their place as a global power and how America and the West see their place as a global, as global power brokers, and obviously, especially the United States. We never ever do we ever discuss using nukes in Iraq? The last time we discussed using nukes in a conflict was Korea, and
Right.
fucking Truman replaced MacArthur because of it. And
Right.
that's in the 50s, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever said, "Oh, you better hey,
We've got
hey,
the
you Viet Cong, you many army guys in Baghdad, you Taliban, you better let us do what we want to do, or we'll fucking nuke you." Now, of
Right.
course, there were maniacs who said that, but nobody
Nobody actually with the power to do it.
Nobody
Right.
actually fucking.
Yeah.
Nobody had. The Pentagon never said, let's turn Baghdad into a molten radioactive heap. That was
Right.
never on the table. That was never discussed.
That was the kind of shit that like right-wing maggot callers calling into C-SPAN.
Yeah,
said.
they would go. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, let's dip our bullets in pig fat and let's turn the Middle East into a parking lot. That was never going to happen. It was was never. Fuck off.
Well, even the
Russians,
leadership,
the Russians will. The Russians do say it on the regular.
Right.
They threaten to nuke London or Paris, for God's sakes. I mean, it may not be realistic, but the sheer fact that they're put, and this is state. There is no independent media in Russia, so this is coming from the power established. This is coming from the Kremlin. It just it just baffles me that we would give this the time of day,
right?
Because
as a talking point,
what happens? Let's say we are so afraid of mutually assured destruction, we are so deluded that we think the Russians will actually do a full scale launch, and it's the day after. It's
right.
Everything. It's all over. It's the apocalypse.
Which I just watched again recently, by the way.
The day after, really?
Yeah.
Does it hold up?
No, not at all. It's hilarious.
No, I'm sure
it's adorable.
I
mean, the best part about it is the warning ahead of time about talk to your children about this, and if the
I remember
one of the first times they're like, one of the actors in it is like, "Hi, I'm in this horrifying ABC
this is a
telenovela
fiction
about the end of the world." Right? Yeah.
I mean that. Unless short of a full-scale nuclear exchange between Russia and the West, and in America in particular, short of that, they drop a nuke on anywhere.
Yeah.
Kiev, London, Paris, the front lines. It doesn't matter. You use a nuke, it's done. It's over.
Right.
There's a no-fly zone. There is the entire world turns against Moscow. Putin is on borrowed time. Yada yada yada. All the rest of it. So this this cowering, because aside from the fellow travelers who really do believe in that, the Christian nationalism stuff, and Putin's a really good guy because he protects his people. He doesn't protect his people.
The Christians, right? That's what Marge said this week, which is just.
Yeah, I know she did. I know.
Oh my God, that garbage was fucking hilarious.
Oh God, she doesn't even understand what the UOC, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, it works for a KGB agent, the patriarch, the Pope of the Russian Orthodox Church, and by extension, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, is a fucking KGB agent. They're not a religion. They're
it's a manufactured, created organization specifically.
That she
just like the PLO.
Directly regurgitated. It's the lack of understanding of it all is just amazing to me. But screw her and screw that element. But there's another large element in America and in our elected officials who are like, we can't push Russia too hard because they're a nuclear power, and we can't. It's scary. It's scary, the idea of a nuclear exchange. Understandably so. But if we always acquiesce to Moscow's threat of, hey, we always got these nukes, you better do what we want, or we got these nukes, then we're just living under the threat of a bully. And we can't do that. And the Ukraine, there's a very good possibility if a nuke drops, it could be on this soil. Now, maybe not Kiev, because it's the birthplace of Russian Orthodox religion. The Lavras here and all the rest of it. But, if they were to drop a nuke on Lviv, or if they were to drop a nuke on Kharkiv, let's say, God forbid, terrible scenario, a city of 1.2 million people. And they're clearly looking at they have their their bullseye. They have their focus on Kharkiv, clearly. If they were to nuke Kharkiv, no fly zone, instantly. NATO troops inside Ukraine. They know that. They know that. They are depending on us being so afraid of them that we will not defend these people who have a sovereign right to defend themselves, and which, again, we guaranteed that sovereign right. And so what's next? What's next? The Baltics? Because there's, let me tell you,
well, there
are ethnic Russians in Estonia right now who I am sure there are GRU, and I'm not just sure, it's a known fact,
right,
that there are Russian military intelligence agents and provocateurs trying to make that happen. It'll be the Baltics next, and then ultimately it might be Poland, and it might not be troops that go marching in to Warsaw. It could be a this fomenting of dissent, the political disruption, economic corruption, criminal, all the rest of it. That could happen after Ukraine, because this argument that Moscow will not stop at Ukraine is 100% true.
Right.
It may not be tanks. But if they are emboldened by Western fecklessness and a lack of resolve and will, they will keep coming, and they want to dominate Europe. It is very clear that their intention is to be the dominant power on the European continent, which will be very bad for the transatlantic alliance and relationship, which benefits us greatly. So I am very frustrated with these guys in Congress and the element that are being fed by Fox News or News Nation or all the echo chambers and all the rest of it, saying that that's the problem over there and it's not for us. Well, we thought about that. We thought that too in World War I and World War II. And how did that turn out?
Exactly.
If we don't stop them in Ukraine with Ukrainians who are willing to fight and die for this country bravely and with sacrifices that are humbling, deeply, deeply humbling. The fact that these people are willing to sacrifice so much so that generations of this country and the unborn, the people, generations stretching out into the future, these people are willing to draw the line in the sand now with this war of independence. Not like the War of Independence in 1917, not like the War of Independence in, 42, 43. Right. This is the War of Independence that puts this to rest and finishes this conflict on the European continent, where Moscow is not allowed to dominate the continent, because Moscow's dominance in Europe means that it is might makes right. Always might makes right. And we have tried with the liberal, the whole project of liberal democracy, which America is the culmination of, that gets just chucked in the shitter. That gets thrown away if Russia dominates Europe. It will be pervasive. It will spread, and if we don't stop them here, we might see a situation, World War I, World War II, where we're sending troops over again, or we're in a 21st century cyber asymmetrical warfare scenario. They corrupt our political establishment, which is what they're doing right now. But
they are doing it. Here's the thing. Okay,
of course they are, but multiply that by a factor of 10.
Right. Anything you see the Russians are doing at any particular point, directed by the Kremlin. I'm not talking about a Russian human being personally who emigrated here and lives here as an American legitimately, or lives anywhere else, or escaped the fucking country during this when they were conscripting people. Like those folks are in all kinds of shit right now, fleeing to different countries, southern Georgia and other places, Turkey, just trying to get away from this shit. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Kremlin-aligned human beings who actually believe in the mission that, Vladimir Putin as a leader, as even an idea at all, without going, all right, well, I've listened to him, and what he's saying is, Ruski Mir, the Russian world.
Russian world.
All right. Again, some of the same people on our side of the aisle who are saying, if someone tells you who they are the first time, believe them, right? Are somehow not slow to get up out of the easy chair in talking about Vladimir Putin in that way. That motherfucker is directly saying, Russian world. The world, should be run like Russia, by Russians, and filled with Russians. And everybody else can go. And they are and again, look no further to what the Wagner guys are doing to pregnant African women and tell me that they care about anybody else being alive 100 years from now in that regard. And again, you're a little safer, oddly enough, from hedonistic nationalists who believe in their genetic superiority than you are religious fanatics, because religious fanatics believe their world is beyond this place. And they don't give a fuck if the whole place gets blown up. And so, thankfully, the Russians don't actually believe in anything. The Kremlin don't actually believe in anything beyond this physical life. They are Darwinists at to the extreme, and they are they believe in the only thing about the German attack that they didn't like was that it was the Germans doing it. That the Germans wanted to be the single race on the entire earth and the perfect, no, that's our fucking job, is the idea. Not because they were like, that's not right. Because say what you will about the Allies and the rest of Europe, we just did it because it wasn't right. It was just fucking wrong. And there is that.
And we recognize that a world under totalitarianism and authoritarianism is a direct threat to the American and, by extension, liberal democracy project. That ever since the age of reason and the age of enlightenment, we have been trying to pull ourselves out of the jungle. The Russians would have us return to a system where might makes right. And that's if you live in Russia, if you have spent time in Russia, if you study Russia, the whole idea in Russia is you can pretend to have law, you can pretend to have democracy, you can pretend to be something other than a base animal who uses force and power. And, they look at us as naive. They look at the West as hypocritical because, yes, they point out all the times that we fail in our aspirations. But it's still the Lincoln quote for me. It is the letter to Joshua Speed in 1855 in the run up to the Civil War, where Lincoln says, as bad as it is, these guys who want to throw out the idea of democracy and just go with base power and authoritarianism, at least we try to be better. We may fail at it, but we try. The Russians' alternative, what Moscow is presenting, is stop trying. Stop pretending to have the rule of law. Stop trying to better yourselves, to improve, to make this world a more equitable, beneficial place for every human being.
For our
power rules.
For our anti-war people, if you're anti-war, you're against the aggressor in a fight. Because the other party who was attacked is not a warring party. They aren't. The Ukrainians are not. They're not in a war of their choosing, right? I mean, it's an important distinction because we talk about. We talk about war as if it's as soon as it starts, both sides are equally culpable. Self-defense is not war, and it's like self-defense is not violence. It isn't. It simply is not. I don't know anybody who would kind of make that argument that if a woman is being sexually assaulted and she fights back, she is now morally on par with her rapist. What the ever-loving fuck are you talking about? And that is exactly what they're saying about the Russians and the Ukrainians. It's got to be distinct.
And anybody who says to you, yeah, but the Ukrainians were treating the ethnic Russians in the East, poorly. Not true. Just not true.
Well,
that was fomented and created by the Russians.
Even still, there are a myriad ways
it's the onslaught.
if that were even remotely true, there are a myriad of ways in the rule of law world that we live in to deal with that particular thing. We have lots of other options besides carpet bombing civilians and trying to destroy their capital. That's it. In the situation where one side is the aggressor, they are the warring party. The defending party is at war, but not in war. They have not, this is not their own choosing. Again, a woman who fights back against her attacker in a sexual assault is not suddenly a rapist on par with them. It doesn't work that way. It never will. The other thing is that if you believe in non-interventionist policies, you are always and every time on the side of the aggressor. Non-interventionism, by its nature, dictates you are on the side of the aggressor, the attacker. Now, sometimes that's okay. If it's a defensive act and you're thinking, oh, this country, they were wheedling the way into the country and they were going to destroy it from the inside, and they did a strike because there was fighting at their border and they knew this thing was coming and they did whatever. Okay, let's just say you believe in one country over the other, and they were genuinely being attacked in other ways, and they fought back, and they were the aggressor in this particular battle, but not in the war in general, whatever. You could be right in that situation, I suppose. But 99% of the time, the warring party that acts out of fucking, its own just desire for whatever resources the other country has or any of that shit, that is specifically, if you want to go, you know what, it's not our business, we're standing back, then you are on the side of the aggressor. It may not be your full responsibility, but if you have the ability to respond and you don't, that's a choice. And America, for example, in Rwanda, had the ability to respond, and we didn't. And 800,000 people died in 100 days. Now, you put that in context with how we have felt about Gaza and Israel, how we have thought about the Russian deaths, just the Russian deaths in this war that's gone on for 3 years. We're talking about how we're about to hit 500,000 Russian soldiers dead in this. In Darfur, in Rwanda rather, 800,000 people died in 100 days by machete. We're not talking about fucking bombings of buildings and the whole building collapsed and there was a bunch of people in there. We're talking about door to door, house to fucking house. 800,000 people. And Bill Clinton says the biggest regret of his entire presidency was not acting sooner in that regard, because it only took 100 days to kill 800,000 people. That was not in the 1600s. That was in the 90s. And if you don't have the ability to do anything about it, if you would just be another body on the field, I can understand why you're a non-interventionist in that situation. But the idea that the U.S. population or Europe doesn't have the financial or military ability to aid in a situation like that is fucking absurd. And therefore, we allowed it to happen in that regard. Now, there are areas where, again, only going so far as to not endangering your life or your families in a particular situation. Zombie world rules. There's a family across the zombies are heading to that house. You could save them, but then the zombies would know your house was there and kill your entire family. You're making the decision based on that, right? That's the zombie version of the trolley car agreement, right? I could, but I can warn them. I could do other things, but I can't go over there and help them fight off the zombies. I don't have the strength to do it, and I've got to protect my family. That's fine. But if there's 600 of you in a stadium, 35 zombies, and there's 12 people and women and children in a fucking house, and you're like, not my problem. That says more about you than about the fucking zombies.
Yep. And to take it even the step further than that is, what do you think happens after they take Ukraine?
Right.
Do you think? I mean, we even if, and I do believe that they will continue to try to dominate the European continent, either by actual physical conflict, sending in troops, which is fraught with difficulty for them too. But they will not stop in their attempt to dominate the continent and to control the continent by other means. And this will be their foothold into doing that. They will be emboldened to do that. So it will force us, if Ukraine falls, the fault line then moves west towards the border with Poland. And then our GDP, our military spending is going to go through the roof yet again. So we'll have to contend with that. And this conflict will continue. If you punch the bully in the nose and say, no, that's as far. And by the way, we don't have to do the punching. All we have to do is help the people who want to do. The Ukrainians don't want.
They don't want us to fight the battle for them.
They wouldn't.
They're just out. They're outgunned.
Yeah,
they
wouldn't turn
That's
it
all.
away. They might not turn it away if, like, French troops has been floated this idea of French troops coming here, for example. They wouldn't turn it away, but nor are they necessarily desiring it. I hear it time and time and time and time again. Give us the means to defend ourselves. We will do the fighting because we know what's at stake here. We will lose our sovereignty. We will defend ourselves. Just give us the weapons. We'll do the heavy lifting. And for us to then go, oh, no, it's too fraught with dangers.
Right.
And we're going to turn away from the agreements and the promises that we made. It's not okay, man. It's not. And
right.
We need,
I'll tell you what.
We are
it's not even that it's
crisis point.
The weird part is that it's not even so much about a farcical back and forth about it. It's that's not even why they're doing it. The Freedom Caucus is not worried about a nuclear war between Russia and the United States. Not really. They're not worried about how much the fucking war costs because they couldn't possibly dump enough military funding in when Trump was there and at any other time. They are specifically acting in the interests of the Kremlin to the detriment of Ukraine. That's it. And it's not because they give a fuck. If Russia took over Poland, fuck, they care about Poland. And they, from their point of view, that there is a financial benefit from them someplace down the line. That Trump Tower, Warsaw, will be a place they can visit as a monument to whatever bullshit they were willing to swallow. So again, we think of it in those terms. We think of whether or not Russia will actually engage in the use of nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff. We genuinely consider those things. That's not really what the fuck they're talking about. I don't buy for a fucking second that's what's his name, Biggs or Marjorie Taylor. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene's just dumb. She's downwind from this shit. So whatever she thinks about it is all derivative anyways. But let's see if I can bring something up. I want to show
understanding of the conflict. She has no understanding of this conflict.
No,
none whatsoever.
Yeah.
Or Gates, for that matter.
Yeah. I want to show everybody a picture. This is from 60 Minutes. This is from, during the, a report they did, like, on the Rwandan genocide. They did, like, a look back. Okay, see these women right here? These women, there's 6 of them. They're hiding in a bathroom. They hid in a bathroom this size. We've heard about the Diary of Anne Frank. Well, this would be the Diary of Rwanda in this respect. And a preacher, a minister, for all you religion sucks folks, hid her. He's a Houthi. He hid them in their house, in his house, in this bathroom nobody knew existed, in one of the side rooms. And when the first group of guys with machetes showed up, they checked the house. They checked several times because a bunch of people had narked on them and said, these women went in there and we didn't see them come out. So they probably hiding them over there. And so they went through the whole house and these women could see them, could see them. There was a little tiny window over the top that went out the back door, like a ventilation thing, but you couldn't necessarily see into it. And the next time after that first trip, the first raid or whatever, this guy put a giant armoire thing in front of the door. So not only are they in there, but there's a giant thing against the door. These women lived there for, I want to say, almost a year. I think it was like 200 days. because after the initial thing, and then there was still these random groups, and they could occasionally, after the world attention got to it after 100 days, after the big slaughter, they were able to get out into this other room, but they still had to go back in there and live in there for days at a time in this room. Okay. Now, do you know what would have happened according to the guy who hid them? I'll see if I can find a picture of the priest that hid them. This is the guy. That guy right there is one of the people who chopped people up. He talks about why he did it, because he went to prison for it and all this stuff. Yeah, there's them putting the armoire. That's the house. That's the church where he is. This guy. Okay, this guy is the one who hid them. Bless his heart. You know what he says they would have done if they found out those women were in there? They would have made him kill them. That's what they do. If you're hiding somebody, you kill them, and then depending on whether we see any hesitation, we kill you. You get to live just long enough to chop up 6 women with a machete while we hold them down, and then if we think you hesitated at all, we kill you. Yep. That's why a non-interventionist stance in a situation like that specifically makes you accidentally on purpose on the side of the aggressor. There's no balanced argument. There's no oppressed versus oppressor in that situation that warrants anything even remotely close to that. It's gross. It's grotesque. It's inhumane. It's violence on a scale that I think most of us would never want to even consider. I mean,
the intention here is to destroy the concept of Ukraine and Ukrainian identity. It's the same thing. It's a genocide.
Bucha. That's what Bucha was.
That's what Bucha is. That's what take your pick. Kostamel.
Right.
It's. Mm-hmm. It has to stop, and we need to get our act together. We really do. And I know there are extenuating circumstances, and this is not as easy as just saying turn the assembly line back on and let's to help Ukrainians to give them the means to defend themselves. But at the end of the day, it really kind of is. Mm-hmm. And we are letting these people down really bad. And I'm very sad to say that. I take no pleasure in saying that. But by whatever means, whatever reason, whether it's, internal domestic politics in the United States, an election year, this, that, and the other thing, we don't want gas prices going up, so don't attack Russian oil fields or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever of it is that we are telling the Ukrainians to do or don't do, or we're turning a blind eye, or we're tying one hand behind their back, it has to stop. It has
Austin's problem was Austin should stay out of the politics of the conversation. Leave that to the politicians. You can argue that back and forth. But a military leader should not be talking about the oil prices. They could talk about like the strategic interests of one country versus another, but that's where it's got to stop, because the idea that you're worrying about shaving 50 cents off of this, and again, this goes to like China's use of slave labor. I don't want to hear anything about forced labor, slave labor. They're using slaves to make shit.
And the argument.
It matters.
And I have seen this argument from people like, was it Medea Benjamin? Is that her last name? Mm-hmm. Over at Code Pink and stuff like that. That by supporting the Ukrainians, we are furthering the war. That is so wrong. The Ukrainians will not
how is that different?
Stop fighting.
How is that different than
it's the rape victim?
It's the rape analogy. What, like the Republicans who go, a woman should just lay back and let it happen because God has a way of making sure what's supposed to happen happens. Are you out of your fucking mind? No. Yeah. And by the way, there is no situation. Why isn't she saying that about all the women in Me Too? In the Me Too movement, right? Why are they fighting back? What's the point? You're destroying like the Weinstein Company employs lots of people, and I would say, fuck them. They'll get another job.
I've been saying this for the bulk of this war, and I think I probably said this to you back when I was living in Lviv when the war started. The Ukrainians will not stop fighting, because if they stop fighting, there is no more Ukraine.
Right.
It's a little trite and overly simplified to say, Russia stops fighting and then they lose the war. Ukraine stops fighting, they lose their country. It's a little too trite and easy, but it does kind of boil right down to that. And I have said for the bulk of this war, Ukraine will not stop fighting. So we either support Ukraine and Ukrainians in their war of independence and in their war of defense, or we abandon them and we watch as Russia commits war crime after war crime after war crime and obliterates this country and commits some really heinous, which they will do.
Yep.
We don't have the power to stop this war. In that sense,
right?
If we
can't convince them to stop. Right.
We can help the Ukrainians to stop this war by winning the war. We cannot stop the war by forcing Ukraine to acquiesce or by withdrawing support, because it's an existential threat. So really, our only two options are: do we stand by are we sit here as a bystander and watch in the 21st century a genocide in Ukraine, in Europe, for a people who just want to live the way they want to live. They don't want to live the way Moscow dictates that Russia lives.
Yeah.
They want to live their way. So our option is not, is either we stand on the sidelines and watch as these people are with one hand tied behind their back, fight a war which they will continue to fight, and I believe will ultimately win regardless, because like insurgencies all around the world, we faced it in Iraq. We were the overwhelming military might in Iraq, and we still lost that war because the will of the Iraqi people was to resist us. It's overly simplified. But
right.
The point
Again,
is the same.
Here's the thing. For the record, it's super easy. And we're against it, and we had the ability to protest against it and change our leadership based on it. A lot of say what you will about the not changing horses midstream that kept Kerry out of office and all that bullshit during the Bush administration. But our 8-year terms and our ability to vote somebody else in based on the idea that we're not going to continue that stuff. The Iraq War ended. Even Bush on his way out tried this mission accomplished and get the fuck out, because he didn't want the Democrats to come in and go, this was a dumb idea in the beginning, and be responsible for a better extract than they had. That was essentially why he did it. They knew it wasn't over, but he wanted that, like, I ended it on my watch. It didn't last the whole time. That's what they were trying to chalk off. Didn't work. But we were against it, and we had the ability to do something about it. The Kremlin is not only not allowing people to have anything to do about it, fucking Navalny is dead. And think what you will about him. The majority of people don't believe that if he was in power, Ukraine would have been attacked like this or at all, period. That's another conversation where I'm sure there's other aspects, but not anywhere near this kind of like just brutal carpet bombing idea. I think he would have courted Europe and tried to build an economic control bridge to Ukraine like it to what was before 2014 would have been the plan. To just stay there. Just use it as a satellite. None of the problems, all the money is probably more than likely what he'd have done. But he's fucking dead, so we'll never know. And the idea that somehow we're on par with that shit is absurd. And by the way, it's just an excuse to not actually discuss what's genuinely happening right now. I even saw a couple of whatabouts in the chat room, bless your hearts, and I appreciate you even bringing up about America's atrocities. I will gladly go toe-to-toe with Russian atrocities and the U.S. atrocities, and the ramifications, legal and otherwise, afterwards, and the desire of the general American public to deal with those versus anything we've ever seen in those ideas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the sheer fact that you are and you're absolutely right. I understand that sentiment, but the sheer fact that you are upset by U.S. crimes and misdeeds and, the things that we do wrong. The sheer fact you're upset about that differentiates us from where autocracies, where you
they're
don't
not.
Because they're not. They don't mind. They don't mind.
Feature not a bug.
Sadly, the Russian people have expressed support for this war in a lot of ways, for a lot of reasons, and it gets very complicated and all the rest of it. But there's not a large spread condemnation internally, domestically within Russia about what's happening here in Ukraine. They don't mind the hundreds of thousands of Russians that have died. They don't mind the fact that Ukraine is suffering this nation they claim to have brotherhood with. They don't mind that. They don't mind being empire. As a matter of fact, they like it. Their identity is tied into Russian empire. We loathe empire. We are uncomfortable with the idea of empire, which is why you have people saying, but what about America and all the, you don't like it, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Russian people, the Russian population
don't mind.
They may not like it, but they sure don't mind. And they also see themselves as an imperial power. It's tied into their very identity. Colonial power, imperial power is not anathema to Russians like it is in America. We're very uneasy with being an empire. Russia,
it's part of their identity.
It's built in, it's hard baked into who they are. And that needs to change. But first and foremost, they need to lose here.
Because that's the only way they're going to realize that the error of their ways in that regard. Because they picked on somebody smaller and their friends came to help. That's how it worked. They picked the wrong rape victim and she had brothers is essentially what we're talking about. And I have no problem being one of those brothers, especially for most Americans, where you can be that brother and still stay in the truck and watch. Like the fucking idea that we're all like, I'm being dragged into this. Get the fuck out of here. No, you are not. That said, we're way over time. We went almost a half hour over, but I appreciate it's a good conversation. It's a long one, and we both feel very passionately about it.
Well, I think we're getting to the place. Yeah, next week. Let's hope so. But this, and we also have to have a post-mortem at some point. The GOP needs to. Yeah,
there's got to be a cleaning house legally. And that's why FISA has to get re-upped. And that's why Donald Trump wants it gone. Because I got to tell you, they're making all kinds of midnight fucking phone calls to these people we may not
like the idea that Russia considers itself at war with us, but we better wake up to the idea that they do. And it's independent of whatever opinion, or whatever stance you have. The Russians think that they're at war with us and they are acting accordingly. Until we wake up to that realization, all of this is it's for naught.
Academic. Right.
This has to. Anyhow, you're right. We've gone long.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Saturday, buddy.
Yes.
The podcast is almost finished. We are almost ready to launch, and I hope that we will be launching in the next week or two. Tops.
Great. And also,
touch wood.
My hope for this Saturday is that the vote happens on Friday, like it's possibly going to. And if that were the case, that'd be a really nice thing. That'll be a good happy ending for the show on Saturday. So fingers crossed, and keep pressuring. Right. So we put the number in the chat room several times.
Call your elected officials, please, please, from Kiev, wherever you are watching this podcast, wherever you're listening to this podcast or this stream, or wherever you're listening to Hal and I speak. I can't emphasize this enough.
Especially
walk
if you're in a red state
every day. If you're in a red state, if you have an elected official, or in a purple state, even more, like if you're in a district that really could have ramifications, call now. Now is the time. It has to be done now. And it's just, I walk these streets every day, Hal. I talk to these people every day. I've been here for 3 years. I put my life on hold. Because it's right. We can't let these people down. We cannot abandon Ukraine. It will be a disgrace, a stain on everything that we hold to be true. And not only that, this will be an amazing country and a very good friend and ally. And we need all the friends that we can get. So please, I beg of you, on the behalf of the people that I interact with every day who are suffering, truly truly suffering, call your representative, call your elected officials, make it be known. Stop fucking around. Let's do this thing and give them the means to defend themselves. That's all they're asking for.
Absolutely.
They'll fight the fight. Just give them what they need, what we promised them. It's so heartbreaking every day here, and I'm so deeply upset. But I still believe in the goodness of our people and in the goodness of America. I do really still believe in it. Call me naive. Call me a pie in the sky patriot. But I believe it 100%, and so do many Ukrainians. And they're so heartbroken about how we are letting them down. And they put a brave face on it, and they say they understand why we're doing what we're doing. But at the same time, I know that their heart is breaking because they are being abandoned by the American people. And I'm sorry to say that, but because we are a democracy, we are responsible for our government. So put pressure on. It's the right thing to do. Please.
Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate it, brother. And we'll see you on Saturday.
We'll talk on Saturday.
Absolutely. You're a good man. Take care. Be safe. And we'll see you then.
All right.
Okay?
Call people. Please call.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Ittner. Thank you, brother. And everybody, we will, continue to put that pressure on. But I really do think that vote's going to happen Friday, maybe at the latest Monday, something like that. But there'll be a bunch of maggot wailing and gnashing of teeth between now and then. Or after, I would say, after the vote passes, because they'll bitch about it, but when it happens, they'll go, we've got to get rid of this guy. And quite frankly, I don't know why the fuck he'd want that job anyways, and maybe could cement himself if you purge the fucking Freedom Caucus, a majority of them in the next election, for example, by either moderates or just by outnumbering them, and the caucus doesn't have any real pull. You'll actually have some room to, put the fear of normalcy back into these into these idiots. In chat room, I want to thank you guys so much as well. And on the way out the door, can we just, I'm going to end on a brighter note. Can I end on a bright note? Because it's a heavy conversation and it needs to be had. And I love you for allowing me to have the space to have it. I appreciate you guys more than you will ever know. And I miss you when I can't be here. And that's just true. I would like to, can we just one little, just to put a smile on your face for the tail end of it? It's at $34 now. That's whoops, there we go. Sorry, $34.01. It made a penny. There you go. Ouch. It's I'm gonna get in while it's cheap, says dumbass. That's 9.24. There's gonna be a little buy at the tail end because they'll try to get some sucker money. This is where the day traders come in and try to bait people into buying more of it. And then this is what happens with meme stocks, just so you know. Near the end of the trading day or after lunch, there's this little spike in most things that are seeing a dive. And people are like, oh, this is the bottom. I got to get in at the bottom. And they choke out the day traders' money with this kind of thing. It's a great setup. It goes, like you can see these little bumps. They happen all the time like that. And then we like this one, like that. It's like, if you do it on the day, let's see if they do like a 5-day. Ooh. And it was, man, they were really going, it's stabilized. It's totally fine. Nope. This is when the financials came out. This is when all the suckers started clearing out their mind, like, okay, these dumbasses. And then the financials came out here, and that was like, fell off a cliff. And then it was like, okay, this is the baseline. This is like Trump supporters who aren't going to take their money out. And then at a certain point, they all went, hey, you know what? I love them, but fuck this. And they took their money out. Anyways, I don't want to lose everything. I'm glad with losing 70%. Good times. So enjoy that. Wop, 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 wop. I think I should have one of those, shouldn't I? Yeah. Where is it? No, it'd be in the sample grid. Yeah. So on that note, Donald Trump is losing millions by the hour. Let's just put it that way. Perhaps even tens of millions by the hour. And he can't take his money out before a certain date. He can't sell his stock before a certain date because he gets a bonus if he does. I don't know what the fuck that bonus is worth. They weigh it against, like, what the fuck is a bonus worth? What am I going to get? More stock that's worth shit? Sell out now. I would have made more money if I'd have ditched out before than the bonus I could have made on fucking nothing. What's 100% of zero worth? So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many. Yeah, I should have probably put this on before we showed it. That's what I'll do next time. Yeah, every time that'll be our check-in sound for Trump stock. Oh, it's so good. And so are you. And I love you. And thank you so much for being here today and allowing us all to have the space to have a deep and difficult conversation about a lot of these things. And still don't see all these fuck Israel folks bitching about Sudan at all. You know what I mean? Just don't seem to mind. It's weird. Death toll's way higher, but somehow, what is it about the color of the people that are being killed in one area versus the color of the people that are being killed in the other? There's something, I don't know, I'll look it up. But at least we all know we must fear the kidney.
The kidney has a very special place in the heart.
All right, take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. And there's a button. What if I push this one? Oh.